Home services companies book most of their leads through Instagram, but it takes time to respond to all of these messages manually, book them inside of your CRM and inside of your calendar manually. At the same time, powerful AI chatbots have been developed that can do this right inside of your website, but not for Instagram. How do you connect both of these worlds? Give me the next 30 minutes and I'm going to show you exactly how to connect your AI chatbot that's built over here in Voiceflow to your Instagram so you can just sit back and let it book your appointments, which is the exact functionality that you're already enjoying inside of your chat bubble, inside of your website, but straight out of Instagram. For this, we will use Manychat, which is a tool that can automate your Instagram flows. But the twist here is that we will connect it into Voiceflow via its backend. We will use a pre-built chatbot inside of Voiceflow that I'm not covering in this video, but you can click the link up here to watch the exact build. I will share the complete Manychat automation via the link in the description below. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to this channel because I'm doing a 30 AI agents in 30 days challenge where every day I put out a new AI agent in a different industry. So make sure you don't miss out on any of the new videos. So today we will cover the following points. We will start with a short demo to show you how it books appointments straight out of Instagram. I will then walk you through the AI agent built in Voiceflow just briefly so that you see what it does. Then we will do a high-level design inside of Miro where I will show you the components that go into connecting these two together. And then we will implement the exact integration into Manychat, the precise automation, step-by-step, beginner-friendly, explaining to you all the connections we make and each step one by one. Finally, we will test this integration again so you can see how you can debug this to find all the errors that may happen along the way. The demo that I'm going to show you is based on this Airtable schema where I have these services and I'm going to say that I'm one of the clients and I want to book one of these services. And then at the end, we will see that a booking will have been made inside of the CRM of Airtable and at the same time inside of the calendar here. So let's assume that I am one of these clients and let's just say that the service that I want to book here is a faucet repair. So let's just say, hi, I've got a leaky faucet. So now we can see that the AI chatbot has replied to me. Thanks for letting me know. Can you briefly describe the problem, the leak, and how is it dripping slowly or not? And I say it's dripping slowly for a few days now. So it tries to assess if it is an emergency or not, and it asks me if there is any flooding, and I say no emergency, just annoying. So you see it goes through all of the troubleshooting steps with me that it would usually go through a chat bubble on my website, but straight inside of Instagram. So that means that all of your clients can directly get instant help and instant information about your services, because in today's world, customers want instant information on your services and your availability. So it says, okay, this is a faucet repair. Would you like an estimate? And I say yes. So now it goes into the services of the CRM that are saved and it pulls out the information required. And it gives me the price of the faucet, how much it takes to fix it, 75 minutes. Would you like to book? And I say, yes, let's book it. So you can offer instant information on your services to your clients. So they don't have to wait for you. And if you're on the tools, this is very handy because they don't have to call you. Everything happens right inside of Instagram. So imagine this happening whilst you are working on a project. So now it asks me to give all the information. I say, my name's John Smith. I live at... It asks me for any parking instruction, pets, and so on. I say, okay, this is where I live. Please ring the bell once you are there. So now it will have this information to save it later on. And it asks me for a phone number and an address. So I say, this is the phone and the email. I provided it my email as well. So this is all the information it will save inside the CRM. And once it creates the calendar invite, it will send it to me inside my calendar as well. So me as the client, I have this availability. Now it asks me for confirmation, which is very good. So I can have a look at it again. And now it asks me when I would like to come. And I would ask, when's your availability for tomorrow? Now it has a connection to the calendar in the backend, to the calendar of the home services company to check for availability. And this is all the availability they have. And I will say, okay, let's do 10:30 a.m. Now it will book this inside of the calendar. I will get a reply with a calendar invite, and it will also be booked inside of the CRM. So the home services company knows at one glance when the next jobs are. Here it is. It has responded. Your faucet repair is booked for tomorrow 10:30 a.m. It gives me a short summary of all the discussed. It will come to this address. Is there anything else you need help with today? And I say, no, thanks. That's all. Now, if I look at the CRM system, we can see that a new client has been created here, John Smith, with exactly the details that I provided: the phone number, the email address, the address where I live, and the notes like a leaky faucet and so on and so forth. And the booking has been created. So if we go to the bookings table, we can see over here that this is the entry for John Smith, faucet repair, with the issue description that it's slowly dripping for a few days, and any access notes. Okay, please ring the bell once you're there. So now the home services company knows everything about this entry. And if I look at the calendar, I can see that for 10:30 a.m. tomorrow, a booking was created between the home services company and the client. And this calendar invite reaches both the client and your company's calendar, so you both get invited here. I will share all the build, all the details inside the link in the description below. And now let's get started and see how we built this. So I'm going to quickly walk you through the AI agent here in Voiceflow, but this is not the point of this video. So I will just briefly show you the state it will go through so that later on we can see basically the transition it does and so on. But I've designed this AI agent in a different video that you can go and click here and watch. This video will focus on the Manychat integration. Having said that, this AI agent has three main states. So the first one is called issue capturing. So if we open the agent here, we basically want to understand from the caller what their problems are and what they want to achieve. So here we basically tell the AI agent that it should greet the customer and then it should capture more info about their issue. So basically asking questions about that and marking it as an emergency if it is the case. And once the AI agent has the info, it will query the service catalog that we have in Airtable and map the issue to a service from the catalog. So if we briefly go to Airtable, I will show you the service catalog that looks like this. So these are all the services that this company offers. So leak diagnosis, drain unclogging, and so on and so forth. For each one, it has a price, or if it is an hourly or fixed price. And if it's a range, it will show the range and so on, the duration in minutes and all the details. And this part of the AI agent is connected here to the available services, basically get available services that connects to this Airtable database. All right. Now, once that's done, it continues to the next step to gather the client contact details. This is assuming that the client wants to book the service that was presented by the AI agent. And here again, it has a few steps where it will collect the service address, ask for the full name and all the details. And after that, it will create an entry inside of the Airtable database that we can see here via the tool create client. So if we go back to the Airtable database, there's a table here called clients, where all the clients are saved that call this home services company. And then finally, once the issue was found and the client was created, the last step is to find a proper availability for the client so that it can book an appointment. And here again, it will ask the customer when they are free, and then they will provide a day, let's say tomorrow at this and that time. And then the AI agent has an access here to the calendar availability and also to the current date and time, because it doesn't know what day and time it is. So this is just a function that returns the current day so that it knows that when it gets relative dates, like for example, tomorrow, and let's say today is the 16th of October, that tomorrow is the 17th, right? And today is a Thursday. And let's say if it says Monday, that it knows that it's the 20th, right? Once it has gathered the details, it will create a booking in the calendar and a booking in the database. So the calendar is a cal.com tool, which is a calendar booking tool that's connected to Google Calendar. And here, if we go back to Airtable, it creates a booking here in the bookings tab, where this is right now empty because we haven't got a booking yet, but you will see how it looks like once we make a test run with the agent. Once that's all said and done, the agent ends and basically it's all good. And from each state to the next, it has an exit condition. So in the first one, it is the customer is ready to book. The other next one, once they gather the details, is the customer was successfully created. And finally, when the user has nothing else to discuss. So these are the steps that the AI agent goes through. We won't go any deeper into them. Now we will focus on the high-level architecture of how we connect Manychat to the AI agent. Okay, so this is what we did just now. And basically, the integration is in the following way. You have to think about Voiceflow and Manychat as being two separate systems. So we start with the user here, that is basically user/home/client. And when the client messages us on WhatsApp, this will pass through Manychat, all right? So I will draw this rectangle here and call it Manychat. Okay, so basically the user sends a message, okay, and it will land inside Manychat where you can see it inside your messages, and then Manychat needs to send that message over to Voiceflow. So this is what happens here, okay? So we will call this Voiceflow, and basically we have a connection here like this, and we'll call this send message, and then Voiceflow responds to us via Manychat or to Manychat, and we call this get response. And then Manychat will respond to the user back with this response that it got from Voiceflow. We call this get response. Okay, so this is how it looks like. Now, the big question here is, how do we connect Manychat to Voiceflow, right? Because Voiceflow has this nice interface here. It has this nice chat interface that we can use, and so on and so forth. You can embed it on your website. You can even call it. It's really nice, okay? And at the same time, we have Manychat that has this interface over here where we get our messages from the user. So let's assume I'm sending a message like, hey, what services do you have? This will land over here inside my Manychat inbox, so I can see it here. So if I'm a human agent, I can just say, hi, we're a home services company. We do pretty much everything around the house. And then as a user, I get this message back over here, where I can see the reply over here that basically I receive from Manychat. But there is no connection yet between Manychat and Voiceflow. So how do we get this done? And the answer is via API. So I will mark a note here and say this is the API. So this will be basically the glue between these two systems. Okay, so this means that the Manychat system in the backend will query a certain URL of Voiceflow, and then Voiceflow will respond back with a response. And basically the message here will contain the actual user message. So which in this case is something like, hey, what are your services, right? And then Voiceflow will answer with something like, we help you fix stuff around the house. Okay, so basically everything that will be sent over here is just as if we would send it over here in our Voiceflow chat box. Okay, so it's the same thing, only that this will be sent in the backend, so you don't see it. It just happens, you know, like magic in the backend. This is what we have to do. And now I will show you a demo of the Voiceflow API. It will look a bit technical, but it's actually very easy. So don't get scared of it. And even if you will, hold on tight, I will show you exactly what to do. So just briefly, this will work via something that is called HTTP request. Okay. So that means that a request is I request something from the Voiceflow API and I will get something back. Okay, so basically this is a request. So I'm just marking it here with brackets, and then this is a response. Okay, and this happens basically, let's say more or less simultaneously. I mean, it's not simultaneously, but it's very fast. Okay, so I will send a request and then I will wait, or the system will wait, and then it will get this response. Okay, so it's as if I said, hey, it's as if I'm calling somebody and they pick up and I say, hey, how can you help me? And then I wait, and then they give me the response. Okay, we do home services, for example. Okay, and then I write it down. So I have to wait for a little bit. So this is how it works. This is how HTTP request works. It's always request and then response. Okay, this is basically the core logic behind it. Now, I will show you how this works inside my terminal. Okay, don't be afraid, but this is very, very easy. And I will show you the connection string. And you find this inside of the Voiceflow documentation. So if you search for Voiceflow Dialog API, because this is how it's called, it's basically using Voiceflow from the backend. And you can see it here. You can basically read all about it here. But what we are interested in is over here, the dialog API endpoints. And this is basically what we need. We need the interact endpoint. So this means that we will send a request to this URL with our message, and then Voiceflow will give us a message in return. Let's go to the terminal and see how this works. So every request is in a JSON format. Okay, we can see it over here. So JSON is a, let's say, machine language that specifies how data is being transferred throughout the internet. But it's very easy. It's composed of keys and values. So for example, here, the key is type and the value is text. That means that this payload is of type text. And the payload then is the actual text. So the key payload. So it's, hi, how can you help me? Okay. So this is just a normal file that is saved as a name with the JSON extension, and I will send this file to the Voiceflow API. And I will do this over here on the left. You won't need this for the Manychat integration, but I will just show you conceptually what happens in the back. Manychat offers you a nice visual way to send these messages to the Voiceflow API. So what happens here, I will go to the Voiceflow API, and you see here, this is the connection string that we have, general runtime voiceflow.com, state user, blah, 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 interact. Now, there is one thing that you have to specify here, okay, and we see this also in the documentation. You have to specify the ID of the user, okay, and this can be anything. This can be an actual name, an ID, and so on and so forth. So here we will just use an ID, like, for example, Rob Voiceflow. Okay, and then we will send this here. So each ID opens a separate chat. So this is such that if different users talk to your Voiceflow agent, that the chats don't, let's say, interfere with each other. And we will use the Instagram ID of the user once we go into Manychat. I will show you this. Okay, so here we will just use the example Rob Voiceflow. Okay, and we send this message off. And now it does this request that I showed you. So here, basically, you can see that it's waiting for 2 seconds. So this was the part where basically when I told you, hey, we call them and say, hey, what do you do? Now it takes 2 seconds and they respond back, and they respond with this message over here. Okay. Again, this is a JSON text. So we can see the time it was sent to us. The type is text, the payload, state, whatever, and so on and so forth, slate, and its content. And basically what's interesting here is the message. And here we can see the actual response of the Voiceflow agent. It says, hey, I'm here to help you with home services. What problem are you contacting me about today? So this is just as if I had written this inside the Voiceflow chat bubble. All right. Now, if I change the message over here on the right and I will say, okay, hey, I have a leaky faucet. Okay, and I save this and I go back and I repeat the same request. Now remember, I'm sending the same file, but I've just changed the file. So I'm sending a new message. And I'm sending this. Now again, it's sending and it's waiting for a response. Here is the response. It happened faster. And we look at the message again and it says, okay, got it. Can you briefly describe the leaky faucet? For example, is it dripping? And is it happening only when you turn it on? All right. So now you see this interplay. Okay. Now you see that I can specify inside of the API, inside of this text here, what gets sent to Voiceflow, and Voiceflow responds to me also in the same format in JSON in this field called message. So now the thing becomes very, very easy. I just have to send message inside of Manychat to this string over here that is specified by Voiceflow, and wait for the response, and then look into the field called message and just display this to the user. That's all we have to do. So to just draw this here inside of the diagram that we have, basically what's happening here, inside the request will be a JSON string, okay, that will contain exactly what we had previously. So it will send this information over here. So this is how the request looks like. And then here, instead of I have a leaky faucet, will be whatever the user message is. So this will be a variable, all right? This is how it looks like. And we will take this from inside of Manychat because we have access to the last message of the user, okay? So this is how the request looks like. This is what happens in this step. And then the response comes back, and the response will look something like this. So it's a huge text, all right? But it's super easy because we don't need the whole text. We just need one thing here. We just need this message, okay? And now the thing is here that this is an array, okay? So basically square brackets mean it's an array, so they can be various messages, but usually it's just one. So we will just take from the first array, so we will call this, let's just say first array or first array item. From the first array item with dot, we specify which sub-object we choose. So here we choose the sub-object payload. And from the payload, we choose the content. We don't even need the content. We just go straight to message, to this one. So this is what we need, okay? So I will just delete all of this. because we don't need it anymore. We now understand how this works. So this is basically what we need. We need basically the first array item and the payload and then the message. So this is the response that we will get back, and this is what we will return back to the user. All right, this is super simple. Now let's go into Manychat and see how we built this, which is exactly the next step that we have here in our outline. Now, if you're in the Manychat dashboard, this is how it looks like. So what we need here is we go to the left to automations. So then we click new automation, and then we click up here, start from scratch. And then here we choose start with a blank. So basically this opens up the canvas over here. And this is a very simple automation. So whenever a trigger happens, so let's say somebody wants to send us a message, this is the trigger that we need. Of course, we can have all sorts of other triggers, like for example, user comments on your post or reel or whatever. So we can have the AI reply to them and so on and so forth. But now let's just stick to the plan. And then once we have the trigger, we can fill in what exactly happens and basically what triggers it. So not every message will trigger it. So for example, only messages that have certain keywords, like for example, hello, or they have a keyword called hi, or help, and so on and so forth. Okay, so if the message contains any of these, we will trigger a response message. Okay, and here we can say, let's just pick something generic. Hi, we can help with home services. Okay, just for the sake of simplicity, showing you how this works. Now I can click set live. Automation is live. We can give it a name here. We can call this easy voice flow integration. Okay, we will change this, but this is just to show you what it does and that it works. We have to come back here to where all the automations are. And if you hover over this automation, easy voice flow integration, you will see this toggle here. Okay, so it was like this, and we click this, and now it is enabled. So now if I message this Instagram account and say, hi, how can you help me? What happens is that I automatically get this message, hi, we can help with home services. And if I message something that doesn't contain the keyword, something like, I'd like to book, it won't trigger the automation because it doesn't contain any of those keywords. So remember, we had these keywords over here that were hello, hi, help. All right. And if we look into our inbox, we can see that we receive these chats. Okay. And we can also reply directly to the contact. Now, in this case, we want the automation to run on every single message, not just when they contain this hello, hi, help, because we won't just send a one-off message. Okay. And now this becomes a bit tricky inside of Manychat because I cannot specify every possible word in the English language or any language for that matter. So how do we bypass this? Now, Manychat has this feature here where message doesn't contain something, all right? And here we can just say, okay, if the message doesn't contain, and then something that it will never contain, like let's say a symbol, like for example, a vertical bar, all right? So if the message doesn't contain a vertical bar, then run this. Now I click save, but what happens here is it doesn't allow me to use not conditions unless I've specified a previous positive condition. So let's say message is, message contains, and so on and so forth. So I found a little hack here where I just specify letters, because Manychat doesn't look at a whole word. It also looks at parts of the word. So if help is part of a larger word, like for example, if it's part of helps, like if they say, I don't know, this helps me or something like that. Okay. It will still trigger. So that means I had to think about what letters are contained in every word. And these are vowels. Okay. So it's A, E, O, U, I. Okay. So if it contains any of these characters, then it triggers. So now this is saved over here. Now I can click go live over here, which is already set live. So the trigger is being triggered outside. So now if I message them again and say, I'd like to book. So I just copy the previous message here. You can see that it still triggers, or anything that I say that contains a vowel. But for example, let's say something that doesn't contain a vowel, like for example, LMK, let me know. It won't trigger. Well, this is a small problem here, but anyways, it will happen very, very rarely that the user will send something without a vowel. And if they do, and if no message comes back, they will probably send something like, are you still there? and this will contain a vowel, and then we can see here, okay, hey, how can we help you with your home services? So the user will eventually send something that contains a vowel. Okay, now that the trigger is set, we have to connect this to Voiceflow, and we'll do this as we saw via the API connection. So Manychat has a block here called actions, and inside actions under automation there is the make external request action, as we can see here. So what it does, it just creates an HTTP request, as we saw earlier, that goes into here. So here we will copy the request from the API documentation. So it is this one. We will copy it, paste it in here, and instead of the user ID, we will use the internal variable of Manychat called contact ID. So we start with an accolade, okay, and then this menu pops up and we will choose contact ID. So the contact ID is for every WhatsApp, for every Instagram contact different. So if I go here into the chat window, I can see here on the right hand side under the contact we're chatting with, it's this number. And we can also see it here by typing in this contact's name for testing, okay, and we will see its contact ID in a bit. We first have to specify two headers. One of them is the authorization header, and this is the API key of Voiceflow. How do we get this API key? Well, we go to our project, and here on the left we have settings, and then here on settings we have API keys that we will click, and then we click copy. So this is the API key that we paste in here, and then we have another header called version ID, and the version ID is either development or production. We can see it here in the API documentation that it is a required field here, header version ID, and in this case we have already launched our Voiceflow agent, so we have published it. This thing you can see over here in the publish menu. So we are already here, you can see version 8. Otherwise you will choose development. Okay, now this is done, and in the body we will copy the JSON code that we had earlier that looked something like this, and instead of the payload we will use the last user message. So we will add a field, and then here we will use last text input. That's the official name, and we can see here in the preview, because we have chosen a contact name over here, we can see the last message. All right, so this is the message that we had here inside of our live chat. If we have a look, our last message was, what was my problem again? All right, perfect. And now in the response mapping, we will have to take the object that comes in and to map it into a field. So to make this a bit clearer, I will paste the message over here inside of Miro, inside of a text field. This is how it looks like, and we are interested only here in the message field, okay? So this is an array because it starts with brackets. So this can contain various objects, not just one. Like for example, it could contain a second object of type, I don't know, let's say image or whatever. So Voiceflow specifies various types of objects that it sends via its API, okay? So because this is an array, we will have to be mindful of this when we specify the response mapping. Now, the response mapping is based on the JSON path. So this is a specification that explains how to extract fields out of JSON objects. Now, you can read about this here, but I will just paste this for you. So it's basically the $sign is the main object. And then here we will have a filter that will use only those objects whose type is text. Okay. And here we choose the payload, and from the payload the message. Okay, so quickly go back to see if it makes sense. So everything that has type text, we choose the payload subobject, and inside the payload subobject the message object. So this will be extracted, exactly the message of Voiceflow, and we will extract this to a custom field that we will call Voiceflow reply. Now this field isn't available in the beginning. How did we get there? Well, here in the beginning we can set a variable to this value. So again, we go plus, we click action, and action also has inside of contact data the operation set user field. So here I can set any field I want. I click on new field, and just let's call this, for the sake of simplicity, Voiceflow's reply of type text. I click create, and I have to set this now because otherwise it won't be created. So I set this to initial value. So I first go into here, then I go into here. So just let's quickly rename this to send message to Voiceflow. And the other one, we will name it to initialize values or variables. Custom fields is a better name, so that we know what all of this is about. Okay, let's quickly go back to the HTTP request. This is the response mapping, so it will go into Voiceflow's reply. the variable that we just created earlier. And now we can test it with a contact. Again, we select the contact we just spoke to, and we will have a response. We click test request. So this is the response body. It's the same that we saw earlier in the terminal, but it's written in just one line. And the request body that was sent with the last message from the Manychat variable. Okay, we click save. We are good to go. And then we connect this to the send message block. And here, instead of the hard-coded message, hi, how can we help you? We just put in the Voiceflow's reply. Again, inside of a variable, and we are good to go. So we click update. Now we go back and then we say, hi, how can you help me? Now this message will be sent into Manychat. Manychat sends it into Voiceflow and gives me the response back. And it will say, okay, I can help you with fixing appliances, cleaning, and so on and so forth. So this is exactly the message that we would get if we used the chat bubble inside Voiceflow. Now there's one more thing I haven't done that I haven't showed you yet. So inside of automations, when we hover over the automation that we just created, easy Voiceflow integration, we see this toggle. So this toggle was set on off initially, so I had to click on to enable the automation, and only now does it work. If we don't want to use it anymore, if we want to chat with the users manually, we just turn it off and it's all good. Now let's continue with this example. So now we can ask, okay, I need help with my dishwasher. It's not starting even though the light's on. All right, so now I can just normally chat with this AI agent via my Instagram interface. Okay, so now it gives me a response. And when I come back now to the chat that I have here inside Manychat, I can see the state that it goes through. So in the beginning, it receives the message from the client and the automation easy Voiceflow was triggered. Costume field changed. Voiceflow's reply, which was initialized, which we can see here, basically this field here. Okay, and then it sends it to Voiceflow. The message comes back. It's being mapped to Voiceflow's reply, and this is the new value. So by monitoring the old values and the new values, we can see how this automation progresses. Okay, now what happens, let's say, if the booking was created, it happens, and the client is all happy, but after a while, something else happens, the client wants to book again. Now, in this case, we need to somehow reset chat. We need to tell Voiceflow, okay, now we want to start over. Because what happens if we don't is, having a look at the Voiceflow automation, it gets stuck inside of this end state, end chat, okay? And then every other message that I send is being processed out of this state. But this state doesn't have access to any tools, to any prompt, to nothing. It's basically done. Now we want to tell it, okay, reset. And inside of Voiceflow, we have this reset button here at the top that looks like a recycling, okay? So that means that if I have a chat conversation here and say, hi, my faucet's leaking, okay? Let's just say, for example, my faucet's leaking. And basically, then now it starts talking to me. If I want to reset, I just click on this button here. It asks me, okay, do I want a new chat? And I say yes. So now I can just start over again with a new thing and say, hi, I want my tree cut. Okay, now how do we do this from Manychat? And the answer is there is a special API request that is called launch. So we can see this over here in the documentation. If we look at the different types, it's this one over here. And the launch type doesn't have any payload because obviously we don't send anything to it. We just want to say, okay, reset. So we need to send this object to the Voiceflow API. And we do this again with this HTTP block. And to save us some time, I will just copy this, duplicate it, and adapt it. So let's name this launch new chat. And here, instead of this body, I will just have type launch, and I don't have any text. And there will be no response mapping because obviously it returns nothing. The rest stays the same, especially the contact ID, which is the chat with this particular contact. Okay, I click save. And now I don't want to connect directly to it because I don't want for any chat or for any message to be reset. I want to have a timer. I want to say, I want this to be 24 hours after the last interaction. So for this, there is this condition trigger here. So I click the condition. It's not a trigger, it's a condition block. And I can add a condition. And here I can say, okay, if the last interaction time is 24 hours before or earlier than the current chat. But for this, I need to save the last conversation time, obviously, okay? And for this, I need a new variable. So for this, at the end here, I click a new action. And in the new action, I want to set a user field. And I will call this user field time of last message. And this will be of type date and time. And I pick it here. time of last message. Set to specific date and time, I choose set to date time of the action, which means the date and time when this action happens. So basically, since it happens after the last message was sent, it obviously has the time of the last chat. And I can name this block save last message time. Perfect. Now, when I come in here, I can choose this inside of the condition. So I can start with time of last message, and I can say is before, and now I want to choose the time of the current action. Well, again, I need a new field for that. So what I'll do is here in the initialization, I will drag this first. I will add a new variable, set user field. Again, same thing. I will choose a new name, time of current message. Again, this will be of type date and time. I use create, and I will set this time of current message to the time of the action. Okay, perfect. So now I have these two variables. I start with this initialization, and now I can compare the two. So now I come into the condition block, I add the condition, and I choose time of current message is before, and I choose a costume field, which is time of last message. And here I want to have an offset, which means it doesn't use the time of the last message, but it uses that time minus, I can pick here, and I will choose -1 day. So that means if the last message was 1 day before or previous than that, earlier than the current message, it basically triggers this condition to be true. And if this was the case, so if the time of current message is before this field -1 day, so if I say, okay, yes, then launch a new chat. And after you've launched a new chat, then just send the message to Voiceflow. So this looks good. Now, what happens if the new message is within the last day? So, well, then I don't need to launch a new chat, then I go directly to send the message to Voiceflow, okay? And then I continue with the same flow. And at the end, again, the time of the last message will be saved. So I have these two variables here that basically control my entire time management part of things. It's the time of the current message and the time of the previous message. One I set at the beginning, and the other one was set at the end of the previous flow. And then again, I set it at the time of finishing this flow. Now, to show you that it all worked, I won't wait for 24 hours to see if this trigger actually works, but I will set the offset just for now to 1 minute, okay? Because the previous message was more than 1 minute back. I click update, and I forgot to set one thing. For new messages where new users contact you, the time of the previous message hasn't been set, because obviously this pipeline hasn't run because they contact you for the first time. So this condition needs to have one more component. So it has to check if the time of the current message has any value. So that means it was initialized in the first place. If it wasn't, it means this flow hasn't run through at all, which means it's a new contact, which means we don't need to launch a new chat because the chat is already new. So we launch a new chat only if the time of the current message has any value and it is before the time of the last message minus 24 hours. In this little example, minus 1 minute, because I'm just testing. All right, let's click update. And now I'm going to show you that it works. So I go to Instagram and I text it. And now I will text it, what was the last thing I told you? Okay, and this way I test if there is any context. Okay, so I want it to tell me, okay, nothing. I didn't tell you anything. There was one problem here. I specified the wrong variable, so I have to have time of last message is before the time of current message. So typo, and basically time of last message has to have any value. All right, now let's update it and we try again. We copy it again. And we can see that basically now it worked because it says, okay, you asked what was the last thing I told you, which was exactly the question that I asked. So it has no context. So I asked it, what was the problem I told you about? So basically now we can see that it has no context because it has been cleared. So you haven't told me about any problem yet. Can you please tell me what issue you have for your home? Just one sentence is fine. So we can see that this functions, this works because the time of the last message was more than 1 minute before the time of the costume message. Now let's set this properly to -1 day. So now if this is being sent 1 day later, it will start a new chat, because we assume here now you can set this to any time. Like, remember, you have access to this complete Manychat automation via the link in the description below. So you can hit the ground running. You have access to all these HTTP URLs, to the Voiceflow HTTP URL, to all the objects here, to the body that we send, all the variables. Everything is pre-configured for you that you can just copy into your own Manychat account and hit the ground running. Enable this for your contacts and make any adjustments. So having said this, you can come here and set the time of the current message offset to however much is okay for you and makes sense for your business. So far, so good. Now we have a working Manychat integration that connects your Voiceflow agent to Instagram. Now there is one more error, one more problem. So I will show you this right now. If I send a message that has multiple paragraphs, meaning multiple new lines, like, hi, I have a question. And then I don't have just one new line, I have two new lines. So I have a different paragraph. How can you help me? The problem here is that when the JSON object is being constructed, and you can see here it outputs initial value, it cannot send this JSON object. Let's quickly have a look at what happens inside Manychat, inside of the chat. So here I started, hey, I have a question, how can you help me? And then the automation was triggered. The Voiceflow's reply value variable was set to, you haven't told me any problem yet. And the new value was set to initial value, which means that then we don't have a change of Voiceflow's reply to its new response. And why is that? Let's inspect the logs. Let's go to settings, logs, and we can see it here less than a minute ago. It's this one, invalid payload JSON. And we can see here, we can inspect what has happened. And let's go through the points one by one. In general, okay, we can see that it was the Voiceflow API here in via post, and this is the payload. The payload was this last input text. The details, same thing, request headers, all right, that's fine. So we can see that the problem here is this payload, the last input text. So this text had multiple lines. And because there's an error, it just means that it couldn't complete this step. And instead of completely breaking down, what it does, it just ignores this step and continues with whatever comes after, such that the user gets any message whatsoever via Instagram. And you can also have a fallback for these kinds of situations. But in this case, we know that it comes from the fact that it has multiple lines. So we need to somehow have this text here, last text input, remove its new lines from the text and replace them just with spaces. For this, we will need an extra API endpoint. We need an extra function somewhere in the internet where we send this text to. It will change any new line to spaces and then return it back to us. And a very good place to do so is Google Apps Script. So we go to Google Apps Script, we Google it, pun intended, and we click here and it will automatically open up under our own account. You just sign in and we click OK, start scripting, and we can see here, this is the dashboard. This is how it looks like. And basically these are some projects that I did. What we do is we click new project, and here we can specify some JavaScript. And don't be scared. I mean, it's not very difficult. I will share the complete code with you. You have access to it. And basically here we need a function that takes an input and produces an output that will have all new lines replaced by spaces. Okay. Now I've already prepared this function for you. And this is how it looks like. So what it does is basically it takes the input text from the input, which is called E, like event. So it takes E, parameter user message, and then it replaces every new line with a space. Okay, this is basically what it does. And then the output will be a JSON object process message containing the process text. And then basically some Google API that returns this to me via the HTTP request. All right, you don't have to memorize any of this. This is part of the AI integration in Manychat with Voiceflow that I will share with you. So you can just copy this and have this inside of your own app script. And you have to deploy this over here at the end. You will click new deployment and you will choose web app. So there will be the type over here. So I'll quickly show you with new project, deploy new deployment. Please select a deployment type. So you can click here, you click web app, you give it a name and who has access. This is important. Anyone has access because we don't want them to be logged in because Manychat doesn't have a Google account. Okay. So this is why it's important to select anyone, and web app execute as, and you choose me, so you basically, and not user accessing the web app, because the user will be Manychat. So it won't be a user, it will be a program, okay? But for Google Cloud, it's the same. It doesn't matter if it's a user or a program. Okay, so me and who has access, anyone. And then you click deploy, and then it will show you a URL. I will show you this now. This is the URL. You will click copy, and you will put this in a document that you have handy later, because we will need this when we connect it inside of Manychat. So I will copy the URL of the function that I've already deployed. And what we will do now, we will have, just as we had a Voiceflow HTTP request, another HTTP request for this function. So it will be an action, again, make HTTP request. And here we will paste exactly this URL that we have copied from Google Apps Script. And you can see that it's super long, super long, super long. But at the end, we will do one thing. We will have to add a question mark and then a query parameter. And the query parameter is specified exactly in our function, which is right here. It's called user message. So this is what we will copy. We paste it here and say user message equals, and then the text that we want to clean, so to speak, where we want to remove the new lines and replace them with spaces. So the variable that we need here is the last text input, okay? Because this is the last thing that the user wrote, and we want to clean this. And then in the response mapping, again, we can see here the response format. It will be just a simple JSON message with a processed message in a single field. So we say, okay, the main object dot processed message will be set to, and here we have to set a new variable, and we quickly click save, because we first have to define this variable in the beginning. So everything that we have to access later on, we have to define in the beginning. So we come back here to the beginning and add a new custom field, set user field. Again, same thing, new variable, and we will call this clean user text. Okay, and this will have type text. And I click create, and this will be set to, let's just say, initial value. You can write anything over here because it will be overwritten anyways. Now we come here back here to actions, and we needed to map the processed message. And now we have access to the variable, and it's called clean user text. All right, and let's quickly rename this into clean user input. And what we will do now is, before we send the user input to Voiceflow, we connect it to clean user input, and then we connect clean user input to this, also in this case here. So we just put clean user input between these two over here. Let's make some space. This is how it looks like. And we need to change here the send message to Voiceflow API request. And instead of last text input, we will use clean user input from add a field. Clean user input. We will quickly check it with a contact to see if it makes sense. Obviously, it won't show anything because it needs to go via the API first. Okay, so let's quickly test the API of clean user input. We have last text input. Now we test this with the last contact, and we will test the request now. This is a problem because it's post, we need get. Okay, quickly changed it. And here is the response. So we have the message we just sent earlier. Let's quickly go back to the Instagram message, which has two paragraphs. So instead of the two new lines here, we have two spaces. We can see here, space, space. So it's perfect, it works. And it will send this now directly into Voiceflow. So let's click update. And now we will go and test this. Again, we copy this. And now it should be good because it has cleaned the new lines and replaced them with spaces. Perfect, we can see that it has worked. Hi, I can help you with home services, fixing this and that. How do you want me to help you? Now this looks pretty clean, and basically this covers all the cases. Now there is one little quirk here inside Manychat that I will show you in the Instagram messaging. So we will walk through an entire flow of booking, and you will see at the end what I mean when we reach the actual booking stage. So I'll just say, hey, my dishwasher doesn't work. And now it's trying to troubleshoot to see what the problem is. Now I'm going to jump fast forward towards the end when we get to the actual booking, so you see what I mean. So I will jump over all the steps where it collects my details, asks for my availability, and so on. So now I provided all my details, my name, my service address, the full address, the name, phone number, and so on. And now we are about to book an actual slot. So it gives me these availabilities. And now this is where the quirk happens. So let's say I say 9 a.m. And now what it does, it will book a meeting inside my calendar and inside Airtable as well, such that both the handyman and the client have the details. And here you see the problem. It says initial value, okay? Even though I said, okay, 9 a.m. So that means that somewhere inside of the flow, this initial value here that we set for Voiceflow's reply doesn't get overwritten. So somewhere Manychat isn't able to get the data from Voiceflow and to write it into this variable. And this happens here at this step, send message to Voiceflow, because here we map the message to the reply. And we can see that it is a problem if we go to the settings and we go to the logs over here. And we can see this is our last request less than a minute ago, and it says response is null, okay? So here we can see that the response from Voiceflow doesn't contain anything. Why is that? We can see that the payload was correct, so we sent the right message, and all the headers were correct as well. Now, Manychat isn't very specific about this error. So in order to find out more about this, we will go to Voiceflow and we will inspect the problem inside Voiceflow's logs. So for this, we go to the creator interface, so where we built the agent. And there is a view here on the left called transcripts and evals. And here we can see all the conversations that we had with this agent. So we have a look at the last one. And this is how it looks like. This is the conversation that we had. Okay, my dishwasher doesn't work, so on and so forth, giving them the details, and then give me your availability. And then I said 9 a.m. And then we can see that actually Voiceflow has responded. But the problem here is that the message didn't get through to Manychat. So it said, okay, your dishwasher repair is booked for tomorrow 9 a.m. The plumber will come, and so on and so forth. Also, if we have a look into Airtable, we can see that both a client here was created under this name and both a booking was created for this client for this time. So everything is set pretty well, but the only thing is the question remains, why didn't the message go from Voiceflow into Manychat? And I'm going to give you the answer, which is quite counterintuitive. The problem is that there is a timeout in this request. So Manychat waits for only 10 seconds for this request over here to return. Okay, so that means that if this request takes longer than 10 seconds, Manychat will say, okay, maybe something was broken there. It will abandon this request and just continue with the rest of the automation. And then this means that the request didn't return, or Manychat hasn't waited for it, and that means that this variable hasn't been set to the last reply of Voiceflow, which means it will remain as it was in the beginning when we initialized it over here to initial value. Now, how do we solve this? It's not possible currently to set the Manychat timeout to more than 10 seconds so that we tell Manychat, okay, wait for more than 10 seconds for this to return, okay? Another variant that we could do is we could implement this asynchronously, which means Manychat sends a message and then doesn't wait for the reply, but then the reply comes back asynchronously at a different point in time. So if we quickly have a look at this diagram over here, we don't wait here for this response, okay? We just abandon it and we just wait. And at some point, Voiceflow will trigger this response over here. So this would be the asynchronous part. It will call webhook with response. And then once this response came in, we will send this to the client. So this would be the asynchronous variant of this. But this is very complicated. This is beyond the scope of this tutorial because it needs you to build a custom backend where you have this webhook and then you have to configure Voiceflow that it should trigger this and so on and so forth. It's a bit more complicated. So how do we solve this easily? Well, usually the time for this to get completed isn't very long. So if we have a look at the logs here, we can also see the times and we can go to the end of the logs and have a look at what happened here when I said, okay, 9 a.m. And then it started to call the tools, get the available services, create the booking in the database, and so on and so forth. So we can see that the moment it has sent a reply, which was 8:35 and 52 seconds, and it sent it out at 41 seconds. Okay, so it was almost just a bit over 10 seconds. Okay, so this was 41,461 and this was 52. Okay, so it was around 11 seconds. Now, it never takes more than, let's say, 15 at most, even when the systems are loaded and so on. So what we can do is, once that happens, we insert a extra delay after this message and we check if the response is still initial value. So we know that it hasn't been overwritten by the Voiceflow message. So we will have a check here, a condition, and the condition will be that Voiceflow's reply is still initial value. All right, so if this is the case, so we name this condition check for timeout, because this is the only situation in this case, assuming there are no other errors, where this situation occurs that it is not overwritten. So this response is null. So we check for this timeout, and then what happens is, if it's still the initial value, that means it has timed out. So then we insert another short delay, and there is a block here called smart delay, and we set it to the minimum that we can set it is 10 seconds. So if I say 6, it will tell me, okay, it's red. Here is a warning. It's must between 10 seconds and 3600. So I say 10 seconds. That's fine. And once the delay is over, we have to ask Voiceflow, okay, give me that response again. And we do this with a very simple dumb prompt. We just copy this over here, we connect it, and instead of the body where we add the user text, we just say repeat the last thing you said verbatimly. So basically it won't change it at all. Okay, we click save, and then this will be saved obviously into the Voiceflow's reply variable. So this hasn't changed. And we connect this to the Instagram message. This is what happens. What's happening when there is no timeout? So if this has just gone on normally, well, we just connect directly to the send message flow. So to make this a bit clearer, I will move these two up like this. So you can see that there are two branches here. One is for the smart delay in case of the timeout, and the other one sends the message direct. All right, so I will update this now. So here I start a new chat, and now I'm going to fast forward to the point where it actually makes the booking, so that you see that the timeout we set here is actually working, and then the message that we sent back to Voiceflow is actually working. So now I'm telling it, okay, 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. And this is the point where it will check all the tools, which take more than 10 seconds. And now this will take about 20 seconds because we already have this timeout after the 10 seconds of the HTTP request timeout, okay? And it seems like it has worked. So we can see your dishwasher repair is booked for tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. and so on and so forth. Is there anything else? Now, let's see if actually this was triggered inside of Voiceflow. So we go back to the Voiceflow logs, we refresh this, and we check the latest chat. Okay, this time it was very fast. This never happened before. So we just say, okay, let's do 9:30 a.m. and then it seems like it has booked it very quickly. So let's quickly have a look here inside of the logs, inside of the timestamps. And we can see here that between the input, okay, let's do 9:30 a.m. It was at 8:55, 33 seconds. And the output of the confirmation, it was 42 seconds. So it was 9 seconds. Okay, so this was very tight. Let's do another one, because this never happened before. So just to showcase that actually it's working. So let's say I want to have my tree cut, and I will just quickly fast forward this to the point where it actually books it. So now here we reach the point where we tell them our availability. It's 10 a.m. and now this is where it will call all the tools. Let's hope it has a timeout to show you that it actually works inside of Manychat. It's taking its time, which is very good. We're pretty close to a timeout here actually, so good sign. So at least it hasn't replied with an empty message with the initial value. So it seems like the Voiceflow had a problem with booking this. So if we look at the calendar, we can see here that the actual meeting was booked, so that's all right. But the problem is when we look at the Airtable, it hasn't booked it inside of the bookings table. Okay, this is a Voiceflow problem. Probably we can see it over here in the messages, but at least we can see that the timeout in Manychat was triggered. And here we go. We said the availability is 10 a.m. So then it tries to book it. Okay, it's a small problem. Okay, it doesn't matter. And then the timeout was triggered. And then we can see here that Manychat has sent this other request that we programmed it. Repeat the last thing you said verbatimly, which is good because we can see it just repeated exactly the same thing, which is great. So which would also work in the case that it was able to book the appointment inside of Airtable. But we saw here now how to circumvent this problem when Voiceflow takes more than 10 seconds to respond by actually putting in this smart delay of 10 seconds and then asking Voiceflow to repeat the last message. So this is pretty much it. This is the Manychat flow that we have here, that basically is an end-to-end voice flow integration pipeline that is able to reset the chat if we contacted more than 24 hours after our last message. It will make sure it will launch a new chat. It will clean the user input. If the user input has various paragraphs, then it will check for a timeout. So if we have a look, if Voiceflow took more than 10 seconds and Manychat has canceled the request, and then ultimately sends this message to your Instagram and has booked everything. Now, you can take this Manychat template from the link inside the description below. You can hit the ground running. You have access to everything that's inside here, all of the prompts, all of the API requests, and also the custom code that cleans the new line and replaces it with spaces. If you like this video, don't forget to click subscribe to this channel. I'm doing a 30 AI agents in 30 days challenge, where every day I put out a new AI agent in a different industry, covering a different topic, covering tools such as Voiceflow, retail, Manychat, and others, and integrating them via voice and text. And if you or somebody you know wants to build this inside their own business, don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to hear about your use case. Until the next one, cheers.